Okay, so why don't we get started now? Welcome to Writing for the APSAC Advisor and the APSAC Alert. I am thrilled that you're here, and Carlo and I are going to be talking through the details, the nitty-gritty about the Advisor and Alert, and we also really want to make sure we share enough time at the end to ask for people to ask questions. I know that when people were signing up, they could ask questions, and Bree has already compiled some of those that we'll talk through. If at any point during the presentation you have questions, if you want to dump them in the chat, and if you don't want to talk out loud at the end, or you don't want to put them in the chat, if you want to send them directly to Bree, she will be helping manage the chat support. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to go through introductions, give an overview of both publications, talk about our editorial vision, and go through the whole publishing process, and then answer any questions that people may have. Okay. So I'm Lisa Shelby, and I am the editor of the APSAC Advisor and the APSAC Alert. I am also an associate professor at Florida State University College of Social Work, and I not listed there as another hat that I wear is a faculty affiliate at the Florida Institute for Child Welfare. My research broadly looks at youth and the child welfare system, specifically those who are transitioning out of foster care, and the outcomes I'm most interested in are post-secondary education and pregnancy and early parenting. Carlo, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. I'm Carlo Panilio, Associate Editor of the Alert and the Advisor. And as you can see here, I'm Assistant Professor at the Penn State's College of Education, specifically in the Educational Psychology program. I'm also a faculty member of the Child Maltreatment Solutions Network. And broadly, my area of research is looking at some learning-related processes that are impacted by early maltreatment experiences and how these processes affect later more distal academic outcomes, to be able to then inform a second line of my research, which is looking at school-based, specifically classroom-based pedagogical strategies to help mitigate some of these early impact of maltreatment.
Excellent, thanks. Bree, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Bree Stormer. I am Director of Publications and Member Services with APSAC. I've been with APSAC for about 4 years now, and my phone is now vibrating. I'm going to turn that off. I manage the production of the APSAC Advisor and the APSAC Alert. I manage the production of APSAC's peer-reviewed journal, Child Maltreatment, our handbook of child maltreatment, our practice guidelines, and our research to practice briefs. So if you're interested in writing for APSAC, if you have an idea and you're not sure what is a fit, I can definitely be someone to support you in identifying that. If you are interested in writing but you don't have an idea, I can help support you in that. The research to practice briefs summarize other articles, so that's a great way to get yourself familiar with some of our, get some writing credits and familiar yourself with some journal articles. And then in member services, I help manage the APSAC membership. So if you're interested in membership and you're not already a member, you can contact me, and I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat so that you have that.
And there's a high likelihood, if you're involved with anything with APSAC, you have seen Bree carbon copied, and she's the person answering questions. She's a great institutional knowledge. And while Carlo and I are going to be giving the bulk of the presentation today, Bree's knowledge is phenomenal, and her ability to problem solve is extensive, and she's an important part of our team and for the Advisor and Alert. And so what we're going to do today is that we'll start talking first with the Advisor and the Alert, but the bulk of our time is going to focus on the Advisor. That is not necessarily to say that these other publications, such as the Alert and the research to practice briefs and position statements and all of the other publications that APSAC has, are not important. It's just that we're focusing on these today. So a little bit of an overview about the Advisor. It's an interdisciplinary peer-reviewed journal, and we'll talk about the reviewing process in detail, but is double-blinded review. The journal itself is very practice-oriented. So while we do have both empirical studies and commentary, our empirical studies are going to be rigorous, but rather than really going into depth about the methods, what we're interested in about is findings as they directly impact policy and practice. So what you'll actually see is that many publications in the Advisor are written for a practice audience, and yet there's another article that may be similar findings, or it's the same study and presenting findings in another peer-reviewed journal article. So we are a membership journal. So the people that have access to the journal for free are all of our APSAC members. That doesn't mean that people can't purchase versions. And actually, I'm thrilled to share that the board has just recently accepted our proposal, and one article each issue will be open access, which will mean it will be available to the general public. It's published approximately quarterly. It's not always evenly spaced out, but we come out with 4 issues a year, and occasionally we have special issues. So one of the more recent special issues that happened right before Carlo and I joined, accepted these positions in June last year, was on forensic interviewing. That was in the works and came out late last summer. And a new special issue that we have that's going to be coming out next is on COVID and its impact on child maltreatment and child well-being. And then we also have a call that's out currently for racial equity and looking at the disparities and disproportionality of African-American families in the child welfare systems and in child maltreatment. Carlo, did I leave anything out about the Advisor?
I think the one thing that I do want all of our guests to understand too is that with the commentary that you have on here, one of the things that we do want to promote is an ongoing conversation around these racial disparities. And so even though we do have a special issue, one recurring column that we have in the commentary is really how do we, as a profession, outline and talk about some of these disparities inherent in child serving systems. So I know that there's a big push now in the wake of the last few years, but I do want us as the new editorial team to really engage in this dialogue for hopefully a longer period of time beyond just the zeitgeist, and to make sure that we are critical of our own practices in the field and our own research agenda, and how we might be either promoting or dismantling some of these issues around racial inequality, especially in child welfare. And so I do invite folks who are interested, or if you do know someone that might be interested in writing one of these commentaries, to do so, and that we would be more than happy to answer any more questions about that.
So the second publication that we're going to talk about is the Alert. So this is actually, let me also rewind one moment. So the Advisor goes to approximately 2,000 people. So that's in comparison to the Alert. The Alert is a digital publication that's sent out via email, basically a big email blast. And it's a single topic. And it typically is a broad summary of research on a specific topic. And we've had several on COVID, and recently looking at foster youth. We're going to have one forthcoming on how to use some data. And it's basically information that we think is really important for all of the different disciplines to have access to. And it's our hope that many of these alerts are continuing the discussions and the dialogue that's starting in the Advisor. This is available to APSAC members as well as anyone else who signs up to receive the alert. So this has 4 to 5 times the circulation, I believe. And so it's going to a much broader audience. That being said, it's a lot shorter, and we'll talk a little bit about the differences in a few moments. So a little bit about the editorial vision. So Carlo and I feel very grateful to stand on the shoulders of giants and the people who have come before us in APSAC, who have built such a strong, vibrant community. And we want to continue where they've left off. And so that's very much looking at making sure that we're interdisciplinary, and that this is practice focused. We are committed to making sure that research does not sit on the shelves, and that it actually is disseminated and is in a way that it's actually consumable. So Carlo and I, the connection that we have is that we were both Doris Duke Fellows for the promotion of child well-being. And one of the key tenements is about translational research and making sure that research is informing policy and practice. And that's really very central to our vision here. And so if I'm totally honest, when we talk about the review process, one of the things that I'm most likely as an editor to give a very concrete feedback is, but what do these findings really mean in practice, and not just one practice? So when our doctors are writing, what do these findings mean for social workers, for law enforcement, for people who are doing forensic interviewing? Like, what do these findings mean for a diverse range? So that's really, in many regards, these two first points are continuing the legacy of those that we follow. The next 2 points are very much our response to where we are in current times, as well as the direction that APSAC is going in. So actually, Bree, I hate to blindside you, but is there any way that you can link the equity statement in the chat feature?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. So the APSAC's board of directors has a statement about racial equity and justice, and we very much align ourselves with this and promote this. As Carlo has said, we have started a column that just looks at this topic exclusively. The other thing that we are really committed to is new voices and different perspectives. And this, when we say this, we're talking about new voices being new authors, so people who may not have necessarily written before. We're looking at engaging more practitioners. And I'm really excited when someone who's worked at an agency and never written for a publication has an idea and says, I'd like to write a commentary about something that's an innovative idea, or something that really was a good idea, but we didn't implement it correctly, or we learned from these mistakes. So we're looking for people who may not necessarily have writing as part of their job, and yet they have an experience that we think is valuable and can share broadly. So we're really excited about those voices and the different perspectives. So we want people from different backgrounds, from different disciplines to share their thoughts and ideas. And within this, I'll connect that we're also very interested in racial equity here. We know that as academics, that there is a long history of white individuals being dominant, and we want to make sure that we have authors from diverse backgrounds. And this is something that making sure that people have the scaffolding and support and encouragement to thrive. So we are very excited for students, for practitioners, for those who may not have necessarily published before, to all consider the advisor or alert. Although I see a lot of this, the advisor being a great fit for the new voices especially. Carla, what else do you want to add to our vision?
Yeah, I think especially with this different perspectives, and I talked about racial equity earlier, so thank you for echoing that. The other piece about the different perspective is for me in particular, bringing in the voice of education. Historically, the APSAC Advisor and Alert have sort of spoken towards medicine, law enforcement, social work, CPS, psychology and public health disciplines, and education has often been thought of as sort of tangential or just a place to be able to then deliver interventions. What I do want to offer is, and so if any of you know anyone in the field of education, especially practitioners or research and practitioners alike, to be able to actually bring in their voice and partner with the education system, especially when you think about the compulsory education needed for K through 12, and how we are able to then maybe partner with teachers, administrators, and other related allied school professionals that might be able to actually help mitigate some of the challenges that children might be facing. And so I think being able to speak from that interdisciplinary lens to connect everyone with a common sort of goal of helping children and families, I think is a direction that we are also envisioning in this.
Excellent. So so the next step is I really want to talk through the publishing process. And this is, I think, important, especially when we're talking about new voices and people who may not have published before. It can be this scary thing of like, how does this actually work? So we're going to break it down and across how the submission process works, and then how the reviews, and then looking at the initial decisions, and then the revision process and publication. But just let me paint the big picture right now. So what typically happens is that someone submits a manuscript to the publication manager. So Bree gets a publication and it's sent in a Word document, and we'll talk about what's the required elements. Then Bree notifies me and Carlo or I act as the managing editor. We take the article that is submitted to us, and it is blinded. So the author's names are not on the front page and nowhere in the document. And we sent it out to experts in the field, and we send it anywhere between 2 and 5. And a lot of that depends on the type of article it is. So for something very technical, we may send it out to more people, and a commentary, maybe only 2. We get the reviews back, and then we make an initial decision. We either accept it and say, great, we're going to publish it. We say, this is awesome. We want you to revise it. And here's the feedback that we want you to address, and then resubmit it. Or occasionally we may reject it. To be honest, our rejection rate isn't very high. And if we are rejecting, it's typically in the context of like, it's a massive revise and resubmit. So consider reworking this and resubmit it again, and I'll send it out for review. So then the revision process happens, and the authors go back and make all the revisions that are suggested, or they write a letter explaining why they're not making certain decisions, or why they're not making certain revisions. They resubmit it, and then it goes to publication. And publication is we have copy editing and proofing, and a whole bunch of nitty gritty that you will get emails throughout the process of everything. And then it goes to print. And it goes to print, and it's available in the next issue that is coming out. So let's talk a little bit about submission guidelines, because we get a lot of questions about submission guidelines. So the information is on the link that I shared that Bree will be dumping into the chat. We seek articles that are about 4,000 to 6,000. Now, that doesn't mean that a 7,000 article, the 7,000 word article is going to be rejected, nor is a 3,000, but that's really what we're looking for. And they have to be APA formatted. Notice that we don't have any specific types of articles listed. We welcome the full range. We encourage authors who have questions about the fit of their article to send the email to info@apsac.org. And you'll see Carlo in my emails at the last slide. You can also directly email us, but we try to keep all the communication together. So it's pretty easy if you send things there as well. But notice that we're not restricting to qualitative or quantitative. You can do a policy analysis. It can be a meta-analysis. So the guidelines are really quite broad. Carla, do you want to add anything?
I think just a clarification on the 4,000 to 6,000 words. Lisa, maybe it might be helpful if that also includes tables or figures to help our readership or our authors understand.
So that does not include the figures or tables. And historically, in the last year, we really haven't had it include the references as well.
So that's helpful to then really get your message within the 4,000 to 6,000 limit, and then any accompanying clarifications can be included in a table or a figure, or maybe even a supplementary if that's possible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So the review process, I've already talked about this. So it's a double blind review process, or I've talked about it briefly. It's double blind. So they don't know, the reviewers don't know the author doesn't know the reviewers. We have reviewer guidelines, and we have them for specific empirical articles and commentaries. And we actually have several categories, because we have some empirical articles that are largely descriptive in nature, and some of them are more complicated analyses. And so we have a set of guidelines. We send these forms out with the article, and we ask them for broad categories of feedback. So we ask them to talk about their overall assessment. So they're going to ask, what is this an article that is relevant and timely and important for the field? And then we ask some specific questions. We ask, is the background information provided sufficient? We ask if there was any missing information. We ask if there's an inherent bias, or if it's not a balanced perspective, or if it's possibly coming to inaccurate conclusions. And then we also ask about the reviewer's understanding of the findings and being practice focused. So we ask these questions of the reviewers, and they type them all up in a Word document. And at the end, they make a recommendation to accept, reject, and revise and resubmit. So all of that information is directly passed on to the authors through Carlo or me. Now, there's also a section that the reviewers make comments to the editor. Now, this is confidential. And typically, this reads something like, hey, Lisa, I really liked this article. I want it to be published, but I think the analysis needs to be redone because they forgot to account for such and such. Or someone says, this really is 2 articles, and I suggested a revise and resubmit, or I suggested a rejection, but really if they could just pull out the qualitative findings and write about that, it would be a stronger article, but I didn't know how to make that recommendation within the paper. So they provide, so we get feedback like that in the comments to the editor. And while we don't necessarily pass that on to the author verbatim, we often in our letter express some of the concerns or points that were raised, or it helps us make our decision. So after reviewers are given 4 weeks to review, they then send us these Word documents. We merge them together into a massive document. And at the top of the document, we add our assessment. And like I said, that we often are incorporating some of the thoughts of that were confidentially provided to us. They can help us with our thinking. And then we also sometimes will say that we disagree with things that a reviewer may have suggested. So in the letter, if we say that we're giving a revise and resubmit, we may say something like, although reviewer 2 asked for a reanalysis of the data, we feel this is not required. We suggest that you update the literature review and proceed with a resubmission. So even though I say that this is a 4-week process to review, I need to be really honest with the current socio-political economic environment. We're having a hard time getting reviews back in 4 weeks. So our review time is actually closer to 6 to 8 weeks right now with articles. Carlo, any thoughts more about the reviews?
Sure. I think this is helpful too as a conversation piece to demystify this procedure, to let everyone know what the process is like. Given that it is double blind, we want to also make sure that everyone understands that this is quite rigorous. And so any article that gets published through the advisor, because of the rigorous procedure process, that, you know, as it translates to practice, that we know and understand that there is a high quality review that went behind it, especially since a lot of the reviewers that we do tap to look at the articles are experts in the field. And so I would also encourage anyone that receives a revise and resubmit to actually do so and really go through the recommendations as bullet pointed, because I think it does help improve the paper and ensure its credibility for use in the practice arena, as well as to increase our understanding of a lot of these issues that are addressed in the research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for people who are new to the process, the revise and resubmit can feel like a rejection. And I am very well that it sounds like it's a big criticism and that we're saying something is wrong and bad with the paper. That's not the revise and resubmit mentality that we have here. As our editorial team believes that the revise is about making it better, exactly as Carlos said. And often when we are aware that we're dealing with new authors, I've had a couple of phone conversations, and it's always something that I'm willing to talk through any of the feedback or to reassure the author or team of authors that it is a worthy topic. One thing that we are committed to, all of my students hear me say a million times that I am committed to a kinder, gentler academy. But in general, I'm committed to a kinder, gentler world. And we do in the guidelines to the reviewers, we talk about feedback being given in a supportive manner. So it's not just the requests for changes, but how they're presented. So there's a big difference with, like, I'm not sure what the author was thinking, including this. It seems a little bit odd to me. That's going to be something that I actually pull the reviewer aside and say, I think there's a nicer way to say this. Although I must say that we are very fortunate with this journal to have a phenomenal reviewers. So thus far, there's only been one person that I sort of gave a little bit of feedback that, like, that was a little harsh. So, and I actually asked if I could just cut off a sentence of their review. So the review process is designed to make the articles stronger, not break an author's soul. So the questions that people have throughout the entire process, I put manager of publications. I didn't put Bree's name in here, but this goes directly to her. And here, Carlo and I, our emails are listed, and we are very accessible through the process. We want to have quality publications. We want people's voices to be heard, and we want there to be meaningful dialogues. So one of the things that we are starting this webinar to talk about publishing for the advisor and alert, but really what we also want is to engage new people in writing. So one of the things that we're going to be putting together is video snippets. They're not going to necessarily all be webinars, but it's going to be information about how to write. How do you take a question or an idea that you have and flesh it out into a commentary? Or how do you take a research paper that has been previously published and break it down into meaningful ways for a practice audience. So these are things that questions that we're going to be answering in a video format, and maybe some bullet points, and really trying to help APSAC members become more engaged in the publishing process. But throughout the entire process, we are here. So I'm going to stop the screen share right now. And that was the rest of the PowerPoint. That was the PowerPoints that we wanted to cover, but we'd love to open it up for questions right now and make sure that we are addressing any of your concerns.
So we do have one question in the chat. I think it's one of those times where policy is one thing and practice is another. The submission site says regular articles should be 4,000 to 6,000 words inclusive of tables, figures, and references. I thought the speaker said the word limit was exclusive. Am I misunderstanding? And I think that's just a policy versus practice issue, but I'll let you elaborate.
Yeah, so thanks. You're right. That's exactly the truth. And to be honest, I tend to want to have submission written as the author wants it. And so if I'm getting an 8,000 word submission, I'm going to ask through the revise resubmit to cut it back. But I'm much more flexible with this word count, and know that some of that is that we don't have the same constraints of having it in print, and it's an electronic version. And to be honest, part of it's also probably that Carlo and I haven't gotten in trouble for it yet. So I'm quite comfortable with it being 4,000 to 6,000 words without including the tables, figures, and references.
Okay, right, Lisa? I mean, that said, we also don't want to, we want to make sure that we don't get a submission that is 50,000 words. And so I think that policy versus practice is helpful just to sort of, give constraints out there. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Bree.
Oh, just a little bit of history. The Advisor was at one point a printed publication and is now a completely digital publication. And so we're less concerned about spilling digital ink, but we do want to be conscientious of practitioners are busy and they'll only read so much. And so when we can be briefer, we try to be. We had a couple private questions come in, and then a couple of things that I've gotten by email that I was sort of thinking of while you were presenting. Will you take an article that is focused on a single discipline, even though the advisor is multidisciplinary?
Awesome question. The answer is yes. And so because part of it, well, actually it's a yes and no. So yes, if it's a specific discipline. So for example, let's use Carlos' example of bringing in the educational system and teaching and school administration and staff. So if someone is writing an article that is clearly the vein is about the educational system, when we're getting to the practice recommendations, I also want to see how this interfaces with other systems as well. So what can child protective services, what can legal service, what's healthcare, like, are there other implications there? So I see this, while this is interdisciplinary, that there are going to be times that part of being interdisciplinary is standing up and saying, this is what my discipline is and does. And so this is actually something that, Carlo is in education, I'm in social work. And sometimes as we're having conversations, there's terms that we use different and different disciplines. And it's sometimes we need to just have these conversations out in public. So I 100% welcome something that's focused on one discipline. And we are going to ask you to expand at some point in the paper to talk about how other disciplines should think about it.
Thank you. The next question, so the submissions website mentions at-issue articles. Is it possible to submit sort of commentary at-issue articles that don't necessarily meet the racial equity commentary?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen over the last couple versions that there are commentaries that are just broader for suggestions so they don't have any data. They're not talking about a specific program, but they're challenging the professions and the field about a topic. Absolutely, they do not need to be explicitly on racial equity. Although we also do think that one of the directions that we're moving towards is that to make sure that equity and justice are addressed by articles. And that's something that we as an editorial team are working with across publications and APSAC right now to come out with a statement as well as some guidelines. So they can be focused on any topic, but we may in the revision process ask that some of the considerations be made incorporated to the commentary.
Thank you so much. The next one that I have here, what is the typical timeline from submission to publication if all goes well?
If all goes well, so it actually depends on where you are in the process, where we are, what time of year things are out, because things are happening quarterly and we also have special issues. So you can submit. It takes about a week for me to find reviewers, maybe 2 weeks. And then we get the reviews. We ask 4 weeks, but we're getting them 6 to 8. So then we send, you can sort of count on a initial decision, I'd say 10 to 12 weeks after submission. And then the revision process, if it's a revise and resubmit, which the majority of our articles are, is sort of based on the authors. And sometimes we say, if you can get this back to us, our next issue is going to print on such and such date, it will be featured in there, or it will be included in there. But after it's accepted, when it's actually going to be going out in the issue depends on when our issue is coming out. Bree, do you want to, you probably can best speak with this historically, because I've only been doing this for a year. We've only finished up 2 issues. Historically, my thought is it's about 4 to 6 months from submission to being in print.
Yeah, I think that's a good estimate. And the one thing that I will note on top of that is once your article is accepted, we go straight into copy editing, whether or not, if you've got a general topic article and the next issue is a special issue that it's not going to be included in, we're still going directly to copy editing. Once the copy edit article is final, which takes 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how much work needs to be done and where the copy editor is with other projects, we put a pre-publication submission online for authors as soon as copy editing is done. And that is something that can be shared with membership. It is marked pre-publication. It's not designed in the beautiful advisor format, but it's available and it can be cited and it's out there. So that is something that we've been doing just in the past, I guess, year and a half or so to expedite the submission process, because sometimes we do have someone who submits right in the midst of a special issue and they're going to be waiting a while, or someone who submits for a special issue and they get their stuff in super early and they're ready to go, and we're still wrapping up some things with others in the special issue, especially I think with the special issue. We're waiting for all of the articles to be finalized before we're going to print, but those other things can be available sooner. So after acceptance, we can really have you up online 4 weeks or so after the paper's been accepted. Actual to print is going to be more in the probably 4 to 6 months. Will be less than that if you're at the end of a special issue. Next one, can I submit a long version of an article to the advisor and a short version to the alert?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we are excited about the opportunity is to really build on the relationship between the 2 journals, the 2 publications. So the advisor as a journal and the alert as this e-blast that it goes out. I love when we can have the synergy between the two. So absolutely, if this is something that you are considering doing, please reach out to me. We can even schedule a call so it's not 20 emails and talk through what that could look like. And actually, there have been some occasions that someone has submitted an article and we have turned around and said, like, hey, this is a great article, but it would be an even better alert. Can we put this out as an alert and just have a very brief column in the advisor? So yes, if you have some great ideas and want to run them by us, we'd love to do so.
Wonderful. This one I think you're going to like. What would the process be if professionals in the field would like to become part of the review process and be a reviewer?
Oh my gosh, I would love that. I'm going to put my name or my email in here, and I'm going to ask you to email me, and we will sign you up to be a reviewer. Or if for some reason you lose my email, feel free to do the email at APSAC.org. We are always looking for reviewers. We do a lot of support to train people. And the practitioner perspective of reviewing is really important. So with some of the articles that I said that we're sending out to more than 2 reviewers, it sometimes is because we want to see how practitioners who are our readership, our members are going to do this. And it's not that I just need a technical look at, was the analysis correct, but rather is this going to resonate with practitioners in different disciplines?
Wonderful. Next question, can you talk a bit more about the legal articles you'd be interested in?
Wow, anything. So to be honest, when I look at the submissions that we've had this last year, we haven't had anything legal except one thing in a COVID special issue, and it's just the perspective of how the legal system possibly needs to change or reform following COVID and some of the lessons learned. Off the top of my head, I'm just about interested in anything that folks have to share from the legal perspective. I'd be interested in talking about some collaborative efforts and thinking about some of the system reform. Carla, what's on your mind around legal articles?
Yeah, I think, I mean, speaking as a non-lawyer, I think
Right.
I'm also in the same thought process as you are in terms of looking at the policy side of this and how we can look at some of those legal reforms that can help support our vulnerable children families. One of the things that I was wondering about is when the question came up about legal articles, are we talking about more specifically about cases, for example? And if that's the case, again, as a non-lawyer, it's something that I wouldn't be as familiar about. But if that is the case, I would think that if these are cases that might really come, maybe bring into question some of the rulings around, let's say, fairness and equity for the students. Speaking in my discipline around IDEA, for example, in schools. I mean, I would say that is something that would definitely be relevant, especially if we think about the some of the challenges inherent in how we are, addressing the needs of foster kids, for example, in transition across different schools. And so, are there cases relevant to make sure that we have enough support to push that?
Mm-hmm. And this question prompted me to think more. I just dropped a link to a PDF. We also have consulting editors, and my apology, we are still in the process of fleshing this full system out. The consulting editors are in different domains, and we currently are looking for consulting editors in early education, child welfare, equity and social justice, prevention, and public health. And what the consultant, and we already have one in legal services, social work, I'm forgetting the other two that we have positions in, my apologies. But we rely on some of these consulting editors as we get articles in, one, to help find reviewers, and two, to help us think about articles that we need to reach out. So if there is something, when we were looking at a COVID issue, we can talk to the consulting editor and see if they can recommend someone in the field who's doing something that's relevant. So this is the beautiful thing about being interdisciplinary, is that we have access to people that are doing this kind of work. It's also the downside of being interdisciplinary. It's like, I can't talk like a lawyer and tell you the legal articles, because that's not my area of expertise, and nor is Carlos, as he mentioned. So we do rely on the lawyers and judges and those in the legal system to help us vet these articles, as well as figure out what we should be publishing.
And I'll just add really quickly that APSAC is part of a grant with OJJDP called the Trauma Informed Prosecutor Project. And we're doing that in collaboration with Zero B's project. And they're actually doing special prosecutors editions of the APSAC Advisor and APSAC Alert that are guest edited by Victor Veith and are being done sort of separately from this process. So if you have something that is sort of specific to prosecutors, you can follow up with me and we can see if it's a fit for that project. If you have something that is a fit sort of within another legal realm, the regular advisor and alert, and of course the advisor and the alert can always use legal articles as well. So we can work with you to find a fit based on what it is that you want to do. Anything else on that one? I've got another question in.
Great, that's another question.
For the column on racial disparities, can this be a literature review, observations, or reflections from practice? For example, I'm working on a mandated reporting project, and one area I'm interested in is racial disparities in mandated reporting, specifically as it relates to teachers.
Carlo, do you want to take that question?
Sure. Yes. I'd say yes to all of those questions. Given it is a commentary, I think if it is, if you are able to support it, especially with data or even with prior literature or experience, I think the stronger case may be made about why we have to look at this. And I think especially looking at mandated reporting, we know, for example, the disproportionality of African-American children being referred in the child welfare system. And one of the things that I wrote in the sort of initial article is to actually challenge the field to look within and ask ourselves why, for example, we have a higher disproportionality of children, Black children, being referred to the system, as well as why in the education system in particular, we also have these disparities. And is there a way that we can look at both problems being propagated by two different systems that culminate in, downstream consequences? And so I think these commentaries with really explicit sort of arguments why we need to look at it are really helpful. And more importantly, what can we begin to do to then help shift our practice, especially when we think about mandated reporting in schools, to make sure that there's fairness and equity. Lisa, is there anything else that I may have?
That's good. No, I agree. And I think that we are committed to these commentary, helping the field move forward and having some difficult conversations. So we're pretty broad in our definition of what's included in a commentary.
Wonderful.
Someone's interested in writing an article on child maltreatment safeguards at educational institutions. Excellent. We look forward to the submission, and that's an excellent fit for what we're interested in publishing.
Thank you.
And a graduate of Penn State.
Yes. And I see, so here, great. So if people are, and I appreciate that you've not necessarily written like this before. We are willing to provide the scaffolding and support that is necessary to get new authors. So this is something that when I outlined the submission process and I said, you submit the article, if you want to shoot us an email saying like, I'm interested in this, and here's an outline of what I'm thinking, or here's a draft of a paper, we can do some pre-work before the submission process. And we are happy to do so. So feel free to reach out to us. We want new voices. And this is something that having students and having practitioners that may not be as experienced have some really valuable thoughts and information, and we want to make sure that this is that it's accessible. And I see the other question: do I provide writing groups or additional supports for people that haven't written before but are looking to break into publishing? Carlo, why have we not thought of a writing group? Carlo and I both participate in writing groups on a writing group on a regular basis. This absolutely could be something that I'd be happy to support. And so if I'm writing it down as a note, and maybe that's something that we do to engage people and talk through the process. Absolutely. When we were talking in the beginning, I talked about like, this webinar is just the first attempt of us to demystify and bring new voices in. And we're going to be posting this information, and we would love to provide the supports to those who have no previous publishing or writing experience.
And I wonder too, Lisa, if it would be helpful. So Emily is one, and maybe someone else who, if you know of anyone that might be interested, to maybe send us an email telling us of your interest, and then maybe that will give us a core group to start this and figure out scheduling and such. It's definitely a great idea.
And actually, I don't know how many people here are members of APSAC, but it may be something that we could think of this as professional development, and I'd be happy to try to connect with other people that are newer in their career. And thank you for the compliment that we've been helpful. But this is something that writing doesn't have to be scary. It is a skill. It's something that you can learn and get better at. And so we're excited to support people in this process.
That's amazing.
Thank
I just
you.
want to say thank you for doing this, because it's amazing. Like I am a doctoral student, and I've practiced in child welfare for 18 years, and I'm a full-time faculty member. And so I'm really excited to start shifting gears from being a practitioner to starting to write about it, but it feels very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking for any guidance and support, and I'm, trying to figure out the best. So I had actually emailed Bree a few weeks ago about translational pieces. And I'm just trying to figure out like, what's the best way to break into this world, but also not get discouraged and overwhelmed. So I am excited to be here and to hear you guys. And thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, you're most welcome. It's why, here's, so I also wear another hat of editing the Child and Adolescent Social Work Journal, and it's not practitioner focused. It's really an academic journal, and people don't read it. And this, let's not have that be the soundbite that goes viral of this today. But the reality is that the beautiful thing about getting something through APSAC publications is that it is getting into the hands of people that are doing the work, and it is directly impacting children and families. So I am so committed to helping get the information out there, and part of that is supporting authors. We'll somehow put something together. My guess is that if I know my schedule and thinking about projects, it will probably be around the fall, but maybe that's also good for some of the students or people on an academic calendar, that if something's starting up in August, it can really be integrated into, a semester plan. But I'm excited about the energy and interest in writing for the publication and people showing up today. And we knew that we had others that were unable to attend because of scheduling conflicts. So this will be available as a video recording.
And And Emily, I saw your question about translational pieces, and I didn't want to borrow from the advisor and the alert time. I can say a little bit about that now, if that's okay. Okay. So we do have a separate project. We call them research to practice briefs, and they're translational pieces specifically from child maltreatment. The way that has been working for the most part is when I see the table of contents for the next issue of the journal, I pick something that I think is going to be of interest to membership, something that I kind of like myself, and I look at my list of volunteer authors and I try to find a match. And I email that author and I say, hey, do you have time to do this on this timeline? That's working okay. But if you want to write a translational piece and you want to write it sooner, feel free to look at the journal and say, hey, I want to write about this article. Is that something I'm able to do? We can certainly accommodate that. And so that is another way to do it. And I'm happy to support you through that process. That gets reviewed by me and one other person within APSAC. So it's not quite as intense of a project. And it's a nice way to just kind of practice at identifying those practice implications, which I think once you've done it in someone else's work, it's easier to do in your own work. And it's a great way to get a writing credit. Lots of students and young professionals have done it that way. I've used it for that. So happy to kind of continue that conversation. I know that some folks have asked about it for classroom assignments, and we're still kind of working that process out. It can be pretty difficult as a classroom assignment. But if that's something you want to speak to me about, I'm happy to set up a meeting, kind of talk through what has been wonderful about that and what has been challenging.
All right, thank you.
So I know that we have scheduled to go to 1 o'clock. So I think we should probably wrap up here and call it good. But what I would like to do is I would like to, after thanking, I want to thank everyone again for participating. I want to turn off the recording so that people can ask questions, and Carlo and I will stay, and Bree and I will stay for a few more minutes if anyone has questions that they want to ask, but that recording icon just makes it too terrifying.